It was a chilly winter evening in a quiet little town called Willow Creek. The kind of evening where the cold air nipped at your cheeks and the streets were almost empty, except for the occasional car passing by. A woman who had spent most of her life caring for others was driving home after another long shift at the hospital. She wasn't just any nurse. She was someone people trusted with their lives. Known for her calm demeanor and sharp skills, she had earned respect from both patients and colleagues over the years. That night, though, something unusual happened, something that would change her life forever. As she drove down a dimly lit road on the outskirts of town, headlights caught sight of chaos ahead. At first glance, it looked like an accident. A mangled car flipped upside down, smoke curling into the frosty air. Her heart sank as she pulled over, knowing she couldn't just drive past. The scene was grim. Glass shards sparkled under the streetlights, scattered across the asphalt like broken stars. Inside the crumpled vehicle, a man lay unconscious, his face pale and streaked with blood. His breathing was shallow, irregular. Without wasting a second, she sprang into action. Years of working in emergency rooms kicked in. She grabbed the first aid kit from her car trunk and rushed to the wreckage. Her hands moved quickly yet carefully, assessing the situation. She checked for injuries, applied pressure to stop the bleeding, and made sure his airway stayed clear. Every second felt crucial. It wasn't until the distant wail of sirens grew louder that relief washed over her. Paramedics arrived, taking over the rescue operation. By then, she had done enough to stabilize him, giving him a fighting chance at survival. Exhausted but relieved, she stepped back as the paramedics loaded the injured man onto a stretcher. Someone nearby, probably a passerby, had recorded the whole thing on their phone. Little did she know, this video would soon become the center of attention, not just locally but far beyond. Word spread fast about what happened that night. People praised her bravery, calling her a real-life hero. Social media buzzed with admiration. Comments flooded in. "This is what true kindness looks like," one person wrote. Another added, "We need more people like her in the world." For a while, it seemed like everyone wanted to celebrate her selflessness, but not everyone saw it that way. Back at St. Mary's Hospital, where she had worked tirelessly for nearly 10 years, things took a darker turn. Administrators watched the news unfold with growing unease. Instead of feeling proud of one of their own, they saw potential trouble brewing. According to them, stepping out of line, even to save a life, was unacceptable. They argued that performing medical procedures outside official duties posed a legal risk, and so, despite her years of service and dedication, they decided to let her go. The news hit her hard. Losing a job is tough for anyone, but this felt personal. This wasn't just about losing income or stability. It was about being punished for doing the right thing. The hospital, once a place she considered her second home, now felt alien. Colleagues who used to smile warmly now avoided eye contact. Friends stopped texting. It was as if overnight, everything she built there had crumbled. She tried to make sense of it all. How could saving a stranger's life be seen as wrong? She replayed the events in her mind, wondering if she should have acted differently. But deep down, she knew she couldn't have stood by and done nothing. That wasn't who she was. Still, the weight of rejection pressed heavily on her shoulders. Nights became sleepless, filled with thoughts of doubt and uncertainty. Was this the end of her career? Would anyone ever trust her again? What made matters worse was how public the fallout became. Local newspapers picked up the story, turning her private struggle into front-page headlines. Strangers debated her case online, some defending her actions while others sided with the hospital's decision. Each comment, each article felt like another blow to her already fragile state. Yet amidst the chaos, there were glimmers of hope. Messages of support poured in from unexpected places, people sharing stories of times when strangers helped them, urging her to keep going. Despite the encouragement, the pain lingered. She began questioning whether nursing was truly worth it anymore. After all, why pour your heart into a profession that could turn its back on you so easily? But even as these doubts swirled, something inside her refused to give up completely. Maybe it was pride, maybe it was stubbornness, or maybe it was simply the belief that helping others was too important to walk away from. And so, as days turned into weeks, she found herself standing at a crossroads. The road behind held memories of betrayal and loss, while the path ahead remained uncertain. What she didn't know yet was that fate still had big plans for her, and that her story was far from over. The story of the nurse who lost her job for saving a life quickly became the talk of Willow Creek, and then some. What started as a local incident turned into a national conversation, sparking debates about ethics, compassion, and the responsibilities of healthcare workers. People couldn't stop talking about it. The video of her rushing to help the injured man at the car crash had gone viral, spreading across social media platforms faster than anyone could have imagined. At first, the reactions were overwhelmingly positive. Comments poured in from all corners of the internet. "This is what true heroism looks like," one person wrote. Another added, "If this is how we treat people who save lives, what kind of world are we living in?" For many, the story struck a nerve. It wasn't just about one nurse or one hospital. It was about whether kindness should ever come with consequences. But while the public rallied behind her, St. Mary's Hospital dug its heels in. Administrators doubled down on their decision to fire her, insisting they were protecting the institution from potential legal risks. In interviews, they tried to justify their actions by saying that performing medical procedures outside official duties could lead to complications. They argued that rules exist for a reason and must be followed no matter the circumstances. But their explanations didn't sit well with most people. To the average person, it sounded cold and heartless, a classic case of bureaucracy trumping humanity. As the controversy grew, so did the backlash against the hospital. Donations dropped sharply, and volunteers who once supported the facility began pulling out. Even some longtime patients switched to other clinics, refusing to associate themselves with an organization that punished someone for doing good. Local businesses started distancing themselves too, canceling partnerships and sponsorships. It was clear that the hospital's reputation was taking a massive hit. Meanwhile, the man whose life she saved woke up in another hospital days later. He had no memory of the accident, but soon pieced together what had happened through news reports and updates from his family. When he learned that the person responsible for saving him had been fired because of it, he was furious. How could someone be penalized for giving him a second chance at life? He felt a deep sense of gratitude toward her, mixed with anger at the injustice she faced. Determined to set things right, he reached out to reporters and shared his side of the story. Sitting up in his hospital bed, still weak but full of conviction, he spoke directly to the camera. "I owe my life to that nurse," he said, his voice trembling with emotion. "She didn't hesitate when I needed help. She risked everything to make sure I made it through. And now, because of that, she's being treated like a criminal. That's not fair." His words resonated deeply with viewers. Here was a man who had narrowly escaped death, speaking out in defense of the person who saved him. His sincerity added weight to the growing movement supporting her cause. Petitions calling for her reinstatement gained thousands of signatures overnight. Protesters gathered outside St. Mary's Hospital, holding signs that read, "Compassion isn't a crime," and "Bring her back." Social media hashtags like "Stand with the nurse" trended for days, keeping the issue alive in the public eye. For her part, the nurse found herself caught in the middle of a storm she never asked for. On one hand, the outpouring of support was heartwarming. Complete strangers sent messages of encouragement, sharing stories of times when acts of kindness changed their lives. Some even offered financial assistance to help her get back on her feet. These gestures reminded her that there were still good people in the world, people who valued compassion over rules. On the other hand, the constant attention took its toll. She wasn't used to being in the spotlight, and the scrutiny felt overwhelming. Every comment, every article, every TV segment brought the same question swirling back into her mind. Why me? Did I do the wrong thing? Could I have handled it differently? Nights were the hardest. Sleep eluded her as doubts crept in, whispering cruel thoughts. Was it worth it to lose everything? Her job, her stability, her peace of mind, for a moment of bravery. Her family and close friends did their best to keep her spirits up. They reminded her of the countless lives she had touched over the years, of the difference she had made in the emergency room. "You didn't choose this fight," her sister told her during one particularly tough evening. "But maybe this is your chance to show everyone what really matters. Maybe you're meant to change something bigger than yourself." Those words stayed with her, planting a tiny seed of hope in her heart. Change wasn't easy, especially when the odds seemed stacked against her. But perhaps, just perhaps, her story could inspire others to rethink how they treated acts of kindness. Perhaps her struggle could shine a light on the cracks in the system, forcing hospitals and institutions to prioritize compassion over fear. Amidst the chaos, another opportunity arose. A small clinic in town, known for its community-focused approach, reached out to her. They admired her courage and wanted her to join their team. At first, she hesitated. Could she trust another workplace after what happened? Would she face the same judgment, the same lack of support? But eventually, she decided to take the leap. The clinic welcomed her with open arms, and within weeks, word spread that the hero nurse was back in action. Patients flocked to the clinic, eager to meet the woman who had become a symbol of hope. Many came not just for medical care, but to thank her personally for reminding them of the power of selflessness. Each interaction reignited a spark inside her, reaffirming why she fell in love with nursing in the first place. Helping others wasn't just a job, it was a calling. Back at St. Mary's Hospital, however, things continued to spiral downward. Morale among staff plummeted as tensions ran high. Nurses whispered about unfair treatment, questioning whether they'd be next if they stepped out of line. Doctors debated the ethics of the administration's decision, with some openly criticizing their handling of the situation. Resignations began piling up, leaving the hospital understaffed and struggling to cope with patient demands. The board of directors scrambled to salvage their image, issuing vague statements about reassessing policies and valuing employees. But these attempts fell flat. Trust had been broken, and repairing it wouldn't be easy. Behind closed doors, heated discussions took place. Should they reach out to her, apologize publicly, or stick to their original stance and weather the storm? No one had the answers, and the uncertainty only added to the tension. In the midst of all this, the man whose life she saved continued to recover. Though physically weakened, his determination remained unshaken. He vowed to stand by her side, using his platform to amplify her message. Together, they hoped to turn tragedy into triumph, to prove that even in the darkest moments, humanity could prevail. And so, as the dust settled and the initial shock faded, the stage was set for the next chapter. Little did anyone know the HOA story was far from over. Challenges lay ahead, but so did opportunities for redemption, for growth, and for proving that doing the right thing always mattered, no matter the cost. The nurse's journey to the small clinic wasn't just a new job, it was a fresh start. The clinic, known as Willow Health Center, wasn't anything fancy. It didn't have the towering glass buildings or state-of-the-art equipment of St. Mary's Hospital. What it did have, though, was heart. From the moment she walked in, the staff greeted her with warm smiles and open arms. They weren't just welcoming a skilled professional, they were embracing someone who had become a symbol of hope for their community. Word spread quickly that the nurse who had saved a life and lost her job because of it was now working at Willow Health Center. Patients began flocking in, not just for routine checkups, but to meet her. Some came out of curiosity, others out of gratitude, and many simply to show their support. For the first time in weeks, she felt a sense of belonging again. The weight of rejection from St. Mary's still lingered, but being surrounded by people who believed in her made it easier to carry. Her days at the clinic were busy but fulfilling. She treated everyone with the same care and attention she always had, whether it was a child with a cough or an elderly patient managing chronic pain. People noticed how she took the time to listen, to explain things clearly and to make them feel seen. Her presence transformed the atmosphere of the clinic. Staff members worked harder, inspired by her dedication, Patients left feeling more hopeful, knowing they were in capable hands. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. Adjusting to a new workplace came with its own challenges. Supplies were limited, and resources often stretched thin. The clinic relied heavily on donations and community support, which meant there were times when they couldn't offer everything patients needed. Still, she refused to let these limitations define her work. Instead, she found creative ways to make do, teaching her colleagues how to prioritize care even under tough conditions. Her resilience became contagious, lifting everyone around her. Meanwhile, the man whose life she saved continued to recover. Though his injuries were healing, he faced new complications. Doctors discovered internal scarring that could lead to serious problems down the line if not addressed soon. Specialists explained that surgery was the only option, but it was risky. Success wasn't guaranteed, and delaying treatment would mean risking further damage. When he heard this news, his mind immediately went to the nurse who had given him a second chance at life. How could he face another battle without her? He reached out to her, explaining his situation and asking for advice. Hearing about his struggles broke her heart all over again. She remembered the night of the accident, the fear, the urgency, the relief when help arrived. She couldn't turn away now, not when he needed her most. After discussing the case with doctors at the clinic, she realized something troubling. The specialized equipment required for the surgery wasn't available at Willow Health Center. There was only one place nearby that had what they needed: St. Mary's Hospital. Reaching out to St. Mary's was the last thing she wanted to do. Just thinking about stepping foot inside those walls brought back memories of betrayal and loss. But this wasn't about her anymore. This was about saving a life she had fought so hard to protect once before. With a heavy heart, she contacted the hospital, explaining the situation and requesting access to their facilities for the procedure. To her surprise, St. Mary's agreed. Their decision wasn't entirely altruistic. They knew refusing could spark even more backlash. But they also recognized the gravity of the case. Lives were at stake, and turning away someone in need would reflect poorly on them. Still, agreeing to collaborate didn't erase the tension between them. As she prepared to return to the hospital, old wounds reopened and doubts crept in. Would her former colleagues welcome her, or would they treat her like an outsider? On the day of the surgery, nerves ran high. Walking through the familiar hallways of St. Mary's felt surreal. Everything looked the same: the sterile white walls, the hum of medical equipment. But it all felt foreign now. Some faces lit up with recognition, while others avoided eye contact altogether. She tried to focus on the task ahead, reminding herself why she was here. This wasn't about proving anything to anyone. It was about giving the man another shot at life. The operating room buzzed with activity as the surgical team gathered. The lead surgeon introduced himself and outlined the plan. Everyone knew the stakes, and the pressure was palpable. Despite the tension, she slipped into her role effortlessly. Years of experience kicked in, allowing her to push aside personal feelings and focus on the patient. Her calm demeanor and sharp instincts earned nods of approval from the team, even from those who had doubted her in the past. As the hours ticked by, the room remained silent, except for the occasional instruction or update. Every movement was precise, every decision critical. She monitored the man's vitals closely, ensuring his body responded well to each step of the procedure. There were moments of uncertainty, times when complications arose and forced the team to adapt quickly. Through it all, she stayed steady, guiding the process with quiet confidence. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the surgery ended successfully. The man pulled through, much to everyone's relief. Tears welled up in her eyes as she stepped back, exhausted but grateful. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to feel a sense of closure. Returning to St. Mary's hadn't been easy, but seeing the outcome reminded her why she chose this path in the first place: to save lives, no matter the cost. Back in the waiting area, the man's family erupted in cheers when they heard the news. His wife hugged her tightly, thanking her for everything she had done. "You've saved him twice now," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "We'll never forget what you've done for us." Those words hit her deeply, reaffirming her belief in the power of compassion and resilience. For the hospital staff, the experience was eye-opening. Watching her work with such professionalism and grace forced many to confront their own biases. Colleagues who had once criticized her actions now saw her in a different light. Conversations began shifting behind the scenes, with whispers of regret and admiration replacing judgment. Even some of the higher-ups started questioning whether firing her had truly been the right call. Outside the hospital, the story captured public attention once again. News outlets covered the surgery extensively, highlighting how the very institution that fired her had relied on her expertise to save a life. Comment sections exploded with reactions. "Karma is real," one person wrote. Another added, "This proves you can't keep talent and kindness down forever." The narrative shifted from outrage to redemption, with many calling for accountability and change within St. Mary's. As for her, the experience left her with mixed emotions. On one hand, she felt vindicated, knowing her skills and dedication had made a difference when it mattered most. On the other hand, returning to St. Mary's stirred up old wounds, reminding her of everything she had lost. She knew she couldn't go back to the way things were before, but maybe, just maybe, she could pave a new path forward. Little did she know, this chapter was far from over. The seeds of change had been planted, and the ripple effects of her actions were beginning to take shape. The hospital, the community, and even she herself were on the brink of transformation. And as the dust settled, one thing became clear. Her story wasn't just about survival. It was about rewriting the rules of compassion and justice, one act of bravery at a time. The surgery was over, but the ripple effects of that day were only beginning to unfold. For the nurse, walking out of St. Mary's Hospital after the procedure felt different this time. The air seemed lighter, less suffocating than before. She had returned under difficult circumstances, facing people and places that once rejected her. But she left with a renewed sense of purpose. What happened inside those operating room walls wasn't just about saving a life. It was about proving something far greater, that compassion and skill could rise above judgment and fear. Back at Willow Health Center, news of the successful surgery spread quickly among the staff. Her colleagues erupted in applause when she walked in, congratulating her for pulling off such a high-pressure task. Some even joked that she should consider running the clinic herself, given how effortlessly she handled chaos. But beneath their light-hearted comments lay genuine admiration. They saw firsthand what made her special, not just her medical expertise, but her ability to stay calm under pressure and put others first, no matter the personal cost. Patients, too, noticed a shift in her demeanor. Before the surgery, there was still a hint of sadness in her eyes, a lingering shadow from everything she'd been through. Now, though, she carried herself differently. There was a quiet confidence in the way she moved, spoke, and interacted with people. It was as if the weight of rejection from St. Mary's had finally begun to lift, replaced by a newfound belief in her own worth. Every patient who came through the door felt it. The warmth, the reassurance, the unwavering dedication that reminded them why they trusted her so deeply. Meanwhile, back at St. Mary's Hospital, the atmosphere was tense but reflective. The surgery had gone smoothly, thanks in large part to her contributions, and the man whose life she saved continued to recover steadily. But the impact of her presence lingered long after she left the building. Nurses whispered about how seamlessly she fit into the surgical team, despite not having worked there in months. Doctors admitted privately that her instincts saved critical moments during the procedure. Even administrators who had clung stubbornly to their decision to fire her found themselves questioning whether they had acted too harshly. Public opinion kept the pressure on. Social media buzzed with reactions to her involvement in the surgery. "She saved his life twice, once on the road, once in the OR," one commenter wrote. Another added, "If this doesn't prove they were wrong, I don't know what will." News outlets picked up the story again, framing it as a tale of redemption and accountability. Reporters interviewed experts in healthcare ethics, many of whom criticized St. Mary's initial decision to fire her. "This is a classic case of punishing someone for doing the right thing," one expert said during a televised segment. "It sends a dangerous message to healthcare workers everywhere." The hospital couldn't ignore the mounting criticism any longer. Donations continued to decline, and volunteers stopped showing up. Staff morale hit an all-time low, with several key employees resigning in protest. Patients chose other facilities, citing distrust in the administration's priorities. Board members held emergency meetings, scrambling to find ways to repair their damaged reputation. Suggestions ranged from issuing a formal apology to offering her reinstatement, but each idea sparked heated debates. Some argued that apologizing would be seen as weakness, while others insisted it was the only way to regain public trust. A few suggested taking smaller steps, like donating to charity in her name or hosting community events to show goodwill. But none of these half measures addressed the root of the issue, the perception that St. Mary's valued rules over humanity. Deep down, everyone knew that real change required more than lip service. It demanded action. Amidst the chaos, a group of senior doctors approached the board with a bold proposal. They urged the administration to offer her a leadership position within the hospital, arguing that her skills and experience were invaluable. More importantly, they believed bringing her back could signal a turning point for the institution, a chance to rebuild trust and demonstrate a commitment to compassionate care. At first, the idea met resistance. Administrators worried about backlash from staff and feared setting a precedent. But as the arguments wore on, some began to see the logic in it. After all, what better way to prove they had changed than by welcoming back the person they had wronged? While St. Mary's grappled with its internal struggles, the man whose life she saved focused on recovery. His progress was slow but steady, and he spent countless hours reflecting on everything that had happened. He couldn't shake the image of her standing beside him during the surgery, ensuring every detail was perfect. It wasn't just her medical skills that impressed him. It was her unwavering determination to see him through, even when it meant going back to a place that had hurt her. Determined to repay her kindness, he decided to take matters into his own hands. Using his platform as a survivor-turned-advocate, he launched a campaign to raise awareness about the importance of supporting healthcare workers who go above and beyond. He partnered with local organizations to host fundraisers, sharing his story at every opportunity. His message was simple yet powerful. We need to stand by the people who save us, not punish them for doing their jobs. His efforts gained traction quickly. Community members rallied behind him, organizing events and spreading the word. Local businesses donated supplies to Willow Health Center, easing the burden on its limited resources. Schools invited him to speak to students about resilience and gratitude, inspiring young minds to think about the kind of world they wanted to create. Slowly but surely, his advocacy turned into a movement, one that centered around celebrating acts of courage and holding institutions accountable for their actions. For the nurse, watching this unfold was both humbling and empowering. She never imagined her story would inspire so many people. Strangers reached out to thank her, sharing their own experiences of being helped by someone when they needed it most. Others confided in her, opening up about challenges they faced in their own careers. Each conversation reinforced her belief that everyone has the power to make a difference, no matter how small the act may seem. But alongside the praise came reminders of the obstacles she still faced. Returning to St. Mary's for the surgery had reopened old wounds, forcing her to confront emotions she thought she had buried. Nights were restless, filled with thoughts of what might have been if things had gone differently. Could she ever truly forgive them? Would stepping back into that environment erase the pain of betrayal, or simply remind her of it? Despite these doubts, she refused to let bitterness consume her. Instead, she channeled her energy into making Willow Health Center a beacon of hope for the community. She trained new staff members, teaching them not just technical skills but also the importance of empathy and teamwork. She advocated for policies that prioritized patient care over paperwork, pushing for changes that benefited everyone involved. Her leadership inspired others to speak up, creating a culture where voices mattered and ideas flourished. As weeks turned into months, whispers of change began to echo through St. Mary's Hospital. Administrators quietly drafted proposals to overhaul outdated policies, focusing on ways to support staff rather than penalize them. Some departments implemented programs to recognize exceptional acts of kindness, celebrating employees who went the extra mile for patients. Though progress was slow, it was undeniable. The tide was turning, and she had played a pivotal role in setting it in motion. Yet even as opportunities arose for reconciliation, questions remained. Would she accept an offer to return to St. Mary's, knowing the pain it had caused her? Or would she choose to stay at Willow Health Center, where she had built a new family and found a renewed sense of purpose? Either way, her journey had already reshaped the landscape of healthcare in Willow Creek and beyond. Little did anyone know, the next chapter of her story was about to begin. The choices she made in the coming days would not only define her future but also determine the legacy she left behind. And as the community watched and waited, one thing became clear. This wasn't just her fight anymore, it was everyone's. The boardroom at St. Mary's Hospital was tense, the kind of tension that made the air feel heavy and every word carry extra weight. The administrators sat around a long, polished table, their faces a mix of frustration and resignation. For weeks, they had been trying to figure out how to fix the mess they were in. Public outrage showed no signs of dying down. Donations continued to plummet, and staff morale was at rock bottom. It was clear that something needed to change, and fast. One of the senior doctors cleared his throat, breaking the silence. "We can't keep ignoring this," he said firmly. "People are losing faith in us, not just patients, but our own team. If we don't do something drastic, we risk losing everything we've built." His words hung in the air as everyone absorbed the gravity of the situation. They all knew he was right. The hospital wasn't just facing financial losses, it was losing its soul. And much of that could be traced back to one decision: the firing of the nurse who had saved a life and then returned to save another. A younger administrator spoke up hesitantly. "But what can we really do? Bringing her back feels like admitting we were wrong. What if it makes us look weak?" Her voice wavered slightly, betraying her uncertainty. She glanced around the room, searching for agreement or reassurance, but most people avoided eye contact. No one wanted to admit aloud that they had made a colossal mistake. An older board member leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. His tone was measured but firm. "Weakness isn't admitting you're wrong, it's refusing to fix your mistakes. We fired someone for doing the right thing. That's not leadership, that's fear. And now, because of it, we're paying the price. Our reputation is in shambles, and unless we take responsibility, we'll lose more than money. We'll lose trust." The room fell silent again, the weight of his words sinking in. Slowly, heads began to nod. For the first time, there was a glimmer of consensus. Maybe bringing her back wasn't just about saving face, it was about setting things right. But even as they started drafting plans, doubts lingered. Would she even want to return after everything they had put her through? Meanwhile, the nurse herself was grappling with her own set of challenges. Life at Willow Health Center had become a sanctuary for her. The small clinic felt like home, a place where her skills were valued and her compassion celebrated. Patients trusted her implicitly, and colleagues treated her like family. After months of feeling rejected and unworthy, she finally felt like she belonged somewhere again. But the offer from St. Mary's loomed over her thoughts. When news broke that the hospital was considering reaching out to her, she couldn't help but feel conflicted. On one hand, returning to St. Mary's meant confronting old wounds, walking the same hallways where she had once felt betrayed, working alongside people who hadn't stood up for her when it mattered most. On the other hand, it also meant an opportunity to create real change, to ensure that no one else would suffer the way she did. Her mind raced with questions. Could she forgive them? More importantly, could she trust them? She thought about the countless hours she had spent caring for patients at St. Mary's, the lives she had touched, the sacrifices she had made. Those memories were intertwined with pain now, but they still held meaning. Was it worth revisiting that chapter of her life for the chance to rewrite the ending? She turned to her closest confidants for advice. Her sister listened patiently as she poured out her thoughts, offering gentle guidance without pushing her toward any particular decision. "It's okay to be scared," her sister said softly. "But think about why you became a nurse in the first place. You didn't choose this path for recognition or rewards. You chose it because you wanted to make a difference. If going back means you can help others avoid the pain you went through, isn't that worth considering?" Her colleagues at Willow Health Center shared similar sentiments. One of the senior nurses pulled her aside during a quiet moment. "You've already proven yourself here," she said. "You've shown us what true leadership looks like. But if you feel called to go back and fight for change, we'll support you. Just promise us one thing. If you leave, it's because you want to, not because anyone expects it of you." Their words gave her strength, reminding her that she wasn't alone in this decision. Still, the choice weighed heavily on her shoulders. Returning to St. Mary's wouldn't just affect her, it would ripple outward, influencing everyone involved. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but maybe that was exactly why she needed to walk it. When the formal apology finally came, it was both expected and unexpected. St. Mary's released a public statement acknowledging their mistake, expressing regret for firing the nurse and recognizing the importance of supporting healthcare workers who act with compassion. The letter was heartfelt, though some critics argued it came too late. Social media lit up with reactions, ranging from praise for the hospital's willingness to admit fault to skepticism about whether the gesture was genuine. For her part, the nurse read the statement quietly, alone in her living room. Emotions swirled inside her: anger, sadness, relief, hope, all tangled together in a knot she couldn't quite unravel. She appreciated the effort, but apologies were only words. What mattered was action. So when the hospital extended an invitation for her to return, not just as a nurse but as the director of emergency services, she hesitated. "I'm honored," she told the board members during a private meeting, "but I need to know that this isn't just about fixing your image. If I come back, it has to be on my terms. Real change needs to happen, not just for me, but for everyone who works here." Her conditions were simple, yet profound. She demanded reforms to outdated policies, ensuring that nurses and doctors could act compassionately without fear of retribution. She pushed for better mental health support for staff, recognizing the toll the job took on even the strongest individuals. Most importantly, she insisted on creating a culture of accountability where leaders listened to their teams and prioritized humanity over bureaucracy. To everyone's surprise, the board agreed. Perhaps desperation drove them, or perhaps they genuinely understood the necessity of her demands. Either way, they recognized that rebuilding trust required more than empty promises. As news of her potential return spread, excitement rippled through the hospital. Nurses whispered excitedly about the changes she might bring, while doctors expressed cautious optimism. Even patients seemed hopeful, eager to see what kind of impact she could have. Yet, despite the progress, not everyone was thrilled. Some longtime employees grumbled about lowering standards or giving special treatment. A few even questioned whether she deserved such a high-profile role after being fired. These murmurs of dissent didn't go unnoticed, but she chose to focus on the bigger picture. Change rarely came without resistance, and she knew that winning over skeptics would take time. Her first day back at St. Mary's was surreal. Walking through the familiar halls, she felt a strange mix of nostalgia and apprehension. Faces she once knew greeted her warmly, though some still carried traces of unease. She smiled politely, determined to lead by example. In staff meetings, she encouraged open dialogue, inviting feedback and addressing concerns head-on. Slowly but surely, walls began to crumble. Patients noticed the shift almost immediately. Wait times decreased, communication improved, and there was a renewed sense of care in every interaction. Nurses found themselves empowered to speak up, knowing their voices mattered. Doctors collaborated more closely, breaking down silos that had existed for years. The transformation wasn't overnight, but it was undeniable. Through it all, the nurse remained grounded. She reminded herself daily why she had chosen this path, not for accolades or titles, but for the chance to make a difference. Every policy she implemented, every conversation she had, was rooted in the belief that compassion should always come first. And as the hospital began to heal, so did she. Little did she know, her journey was far from over. Challenges lay ahead, as did opportunities to inspire others and leave a lasting legacy. But for now, she allowed herself a moment of peace, knowing that sometimes the hardest battles lead to the greatest victories.